Every word you speak is a gift to your enemy, not a metaphor, a literal transfer of power. The moment you open your mouth without necessity, you hand over intelligence, you reveal appetite, you expose the edges of your hunger. And men who understand power, men who have studied it the way a physician studies disease, they collect what you say, store it, and use it at the moment of their choosing, not yours. I have watched this in every court I entered. I have watched men of considerable talent destroy themselves not through failure, but through speech. They explained too much. They defended too early. They filled silence with confession. And their rivals, quieter and more patient, simply listened and waited, and when the moment arrived, struck with the precision of those who had been given a map. You were the one who drew that map. With your own words, in your own voice. This is what I will teach you today. Not how to speak more cleverly, how to speak less, and thereby become impossible to read, difficult to oppose, and dangerous to underestimate. I learned this not from a book. I learned it the way all lasting knowledge is learned, through loss. Florence taught me silence the way a fire teaches a man to respect heat. I served the Florentine Republic for 14 years. I carried dispatches to kings. I sat across from Cesare Borgia and watched a man perform power with such calculated restraint that ambassadors left his presence convinced they had understood him, when in truth he had revealed nothing. I observed Pope Julius II, who controlled what mattered, what others believed about him, with extraordinary discipline, and I observed lesser men, men who could not contain themselves, men who at a banquet, at a negotiation, in a corridor between two rooms of importance, opened their mouths and let their fears escape. Those men did not last. When the Medici returned to Florence in 1512, I was stripped of my position, arrested, tortured, exiled to a farm at Sant'Andrea in Percusina, 12 miles from the city that had been the centre of my life. What I had was time, and the enforced silence of a man removed from the rooms where decisions are made. In that silence I began to understand what I had previously only half observed. Power does not announce itself. It moves quietly. The man who speaks at length in the council chamber may be heard, but the man who speaks only once, briefly, precisely, with the weight of considered judgment, that man is listened to. There is a difference between being heard and being listened to. Most men spend their lives shouting to be heard. A few learn to speak rarely enough that silence itself becomes an instrument of weight. In exile, I wrote less than I knew. I withheld more than I revealed. I calculated not just what to say, but what to leave unsaid, because the unsaid creates space, and space creates curiosity, and curiosity pulls men toward you, rather than requiring you to push. This is what silence does. It creates gravity. Here is the law. The man who speaks without restraint is a man who cannot govern himself, and a man who cannot govern himself will never govern others. Read this again. The man who speaks without restraint is a man who cannot govern himself, and a man who cannot govern himself will never govern others. This is not about being quiet for its own sake. Silence practiced without purpose is merely absence. What I am describing is the deliberate management of what you release into the world and what you keep within you as reserve, as leverage. And every piece of information you withhold is a resource. Every emotion you decline to display is a form of armor. Every question you answer with a question is a negotiation, one before the other party understood the terms. I observed this in Cesare Borgia directly. What made him formidable was not his capacity for violence. It was the uncertainty. No one who sat across from him knew what he was thinking. He managed his silences the way a skilled commander manages terrain, choosing where to reveal himself and where to disappear. This uncertainty was the source of his power over others as much as any army he commanded. Men fear what they cannot read. They respect what they cannot fully grasp. The moment you become legible, the moment someone can look at you and know exactly what you want, what you fear, and what you will accept, you have diminished yourself in their calculation, not through malice, through inevitability. A man who is understood is a man who can be managed. Let us examine why men speak too much. The failure precedes the cure, and men rarely change a behavior they have not first understood as a liability. The need to speak beyond necessity comes, almost always, from one source, the requirement for validation. Men cannot tolerate not knowing how they are perceived. This anxiety drives them to explain themselves, to clarify, to reassure, to fill silence with more words, more justification, more evidence of their worth. But consider what this reveals. It reveals that you do not trust your own actions to speak. It reveals that you believe your position is insufficient without continuous verbal reinforcement. It reveals, most damagingly, that you are not comfortable with ambiguity. And in a world where power is constructed from the ambiguity you force others to navigate, this is a catastrophic admission. I saw this in Florence constantly. Young men newly appointed to positions of influence would speak at length in meetings, not because they had much to say, but because silence made them anxious. They feared that silence would be interpreted as ignorance. What they did not understand was that speaking too much was interpreted as something far worse: insecurity. And insecurity is, in the courts of power, a contagion. Men sense it. They respond to it. They begin to treat you as a subordinate because you are behaving like one. The man of genuine authority speaks when something requires speech. He does not perform his authority through volume. A brevity implies that there is more being withheld, and what is withheld is imagined to be substantial. This is the arithmetic of silence. Let us translate this into the courts of the modern world, because the structure of power has not changed, only its costume. You work in an organization. There is a hierarchy. There are alliances. There are people who want what you have, and people watching to see whether you are ascending or declining. This is a court. It has always been a court. The mechanisms of punishment and reward have been softened by procedure and law. But the underlying dynamics, the reading of people, the management of perception, the accumulation and expenditure of political capital, these have not changed since the time of the Caesars. Consider the meeting. Most men speak to demonstrate presence, to signal engagement. Oh, this is understandable. It is also expensive, because in speaking to demonstrate presence, they reveal preferences, expose weaknesses in their reasoning, create records of positions they will later need to defend or abandon. They have given the room a document. The man who speaks last, briefly and with clarity, having absorbed everything said before him, holds the meeting in his hands. He did not give away his position. He waited until he understood the positions of others. He deployed his statement in the light of everything revealed. This is not passivity. This is the disciplined use of temporal advantage. Or consider the negotiation. Most men reveal what they want too quickly, through enthusiasm, through the speed of their response, through the brightness of their eyes, when a favourable option is mentioned. The other party notes this, and adjusts accordingly, because they now know your flaw. A man who has learned silence does not reveal his flaw. He withholds his reaction, and in that withholding, forces the other party to wonder. Does he approve? Does he have another option? Is he about to walk away? Uncertainty is leverage, and you manufacture it through silence. Now let us go deeper, because the mechanism of this is psychological, and the psychology is worth understanding precisely. Men are disturbed by silence in others. When you speak at length and openly, the other person feels they understand you. They feel safe, and in that safety, they are unguarded, which means they continue revealing themselves. When you are genuinely, composedly silent, not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has decided not to say it, you disturb this comfort. The other person does not know what you think. They begin to fill the silence themselves, often saying things they had not planned to say, making concessions that were not required. They do this to restore the comfort, to invite you back into speech, and you simply watch this. I learned this in diplomatic missions. When I met with powerful men accustomed to others filling every silence with deference, I discovered that if I waited longer than was comfortable before responding, the man himself would begin to expand his position, to clarify, to justify, to add detail he had not offered initially, and in that detail was always something useful, a concern, a weakness in his stated position. The silence extracted it from him. And this is one of the great paradoxes of human conversation. A question followed by silence creates pressure on the person who answered, and pressure produces disclosure. A man who responds to your silence by continuing to talk has told you more than he intended, and you have given him nothing in return. There is another dimension to this that concerns reputation, and reputation is the only armor that matters in the long contest of political life. Men who speak too much are remembered for what they have said. If you speak often and at length, you create a record. People remember not just your insights, but your errors, your contradictions, the moment you expressed an opinion you later revised, the moment you revealed anxiety about a particular outcome. All of this is stored in the memories of those who observed it. And memory, in political life, is a weapon held by everyone who witnesses you. The man who speaks rarely creates a different kind of record. He is remembered for the things he said that mattered, the air of someone who knows more than he is saying. And this air, this impression of withheld depth, is one of the most powerful reputation tools available. Men respect what they sense is being kept from them. The man who offers everything freely is understood quickly and categorized efficiently. He becomes predictable, and a predictable man is a manageable man. But the man who seems to possess an interior depth, not fully accessible to you, who leaves each conversation with you feeling you have understood him only partially, that man retains mystery, and mystery retains power. When this discipline becomes habitual, you become the person whose silence has weight, whose occasional speech is attended to carefully, whose assessments are valued precisely because they are not abundant. You have made yourself scarce, and scarcity, in matters of human attention, as in matters of commerce, increases value. Let me now offer you 5 techniques, not tricks, but strategic disciplines rooted in everything I have observed about how power is managed through speech and the withholding of speech. The first is the deliberate pause. When someone asks you a question that touches your interests or plans, do not answer immediately. Wait 3 seconds. 5. What this pause communicates without a word is that you are not reactive. The person who asked begins in those seconds to wonder whether the question was well phrased, whether your pause is judgment of. None of this is your doing. It is the work of silence, and it costs you nothing. The second is the partial answer. When pressed for your position on a matter of consequence, provide the part of your assessment that is least revealing while remaining credible. You are not lying. Lying is a crude instrument. You are selecting. The partial answer reveals competence while concealing orientation. It tells them what you have observed without telling them what you intend. The third is the redirecting question. When a question is put to you that you do not wish to answer, return a question. Not as an obvious deflection, but as a genuine inquiry that shifts focus to them. What is driving that question at this particular moment? The person answering reveals why the original question was asked, which tells you more than the question itself. And you've received information while giving none. The fourth is the management of reactions. Most men reveal themselves not through what they say, but through how their face responds to what they hear. The raised eyebrow at an unexpected proposal. The slight forward lean when a favourable option is mentioned. These are communications often more legible than speech, because they precede the censorship of thought. The discipline is receiving all information, welcome or unwelcome, with the same composed exterior. Not a blank face that reads as effort. A settled face, the face of a man who has considered many things and is rarely surprised. Let the other person be unable to determine from your face whether their proposal has delighted or disappointed you, because if they cannot determine this, they cannot adjust their offer. In the fifth is the strategic silence in conflict. When you are challenged, criticized, accused, the instinct is to respond immediately, to defend, to explain. This instinct is almost always wrong. The immediate response reveals how much the attack has wounded you. Every word of immediate defense is a confession of vulnerability. Receive the challenge without immediately answering it. Let the person speak fully. Listen completely. Then, when they are finished, wait, longer than is comfortable, before you respond. This silence communicates that you are not threatened, that you are in no hurry, because you are not afraid. The person who challenged you, watching you sit in silence, begins to wonder whether their challenge was as strong as they believed. Your silence, interpreted through the lens of their own anxiety, becomes more powerful than any argument offered in the first 15 seconds of reaction. There is a misuse of silence I must address, because it undermines everything I have described. Some men will practice silence as theatre. They will be silent in meetings as a performance of mystery, so obviously calculated that the theatre becomes visible. And a visible performance is worse than no performance, because it tells observers that the man behind the mask is self-conscious about the mask. The test is simple. Do you feel the need for the other person to notice your silence? If yes, if part of you is waiting for them to observe how measured you are, then you are still performing. The man who has genuinely acquired this discipline does not require its observation. He is simply not speaking, because there is nothing that requires speech at this moment. Functional silence reads entirely differently from theatrical silence. One communicates depth, the other communicates self-consciousness, and men in political life are very good at distinguishing between them. Let me speak now about what silence does to your enemies. In any sustained political context, you will have enemies. Men who will attempt to read you, asking questions designed to gauge your confidence, watching how you respond to setbacks, listening to what you say in moments of relaxation. A man untrained in silence becomes, for his enemies, a source of intelligence. Every complaint he voices reveals a vulnerability. Every aspiration he voices reveals a target. Every expression of anxiety reveals a pressure point. And his enemies, patient and attentive, to collect this systematically. A man trained in silence denies them this intelligence. He becomes opaque. His plans are not known until they are enacted. His alliances are not apparent until they are operational. This creates in his opponents the frustration of working without information, of being perpetually reactive rather than proactive. And a reactive enemy is a manageable enemy. Men confess in proximity to power. When a man is in the presence of someone he fears or wants to impress, he speaks more than is wise. The anxiety of proximity, the desire to demonstrate worth, drives him to fill silence with proof of his intelligence, his loyalty, his usefulness. And the man of power, listening, receives an education. I have done this myself. I have sat in silence with men of consequence and watched them speak at length about matters I did not ask about, because my silence, interpreted through their desire to impress me, felt to them like a challenge. And what they said taught me more about their position and their reliability than any direct interrogation would have produced. The man of silence is not passive. He is gathering. He is processing. He is doing the invisible work of political calculation that most men are too distracted by the sound of their own voices to perform, because he has been listening. There is a cost to this that I will not minimize because I do not give comfortable counsel. The discipline of silence is isolating in certain respects. Men who speak freely form bonds through mutual disclosure. In the man who has trained himself in silence, sacrifices a portion of this. People will sometimes find him difficult to reach. They may feel he is withholding in a way that feels like distance. This is the price. I will not pretend it is nothing, but consider what it purchases. Words that carry weight. Assessments that are sought rather than offered freely. Enemies who work always with incomplete information. Allies who trust you more, not less, because you have demonstrated, through consistent restraint, that you do not say what need not be said. The Republic of Trust is not built on confession. It is built on demonstrated and discretion. When men know that you do not speak unnecessarily about your own affairs, they begin to trust you with theirs, because the same restraint that keeps your secrets will keep theirs. To you will have fewer casual bonds. You will have more reliable ones. I want to address the error men make when they believe they already understand this principle. They believe that what I have described is simply being reserved, naturally quiet. They believe that the constitutionally shy man has already mastered this discipline without effort. This is wrong. Constitutional silence, the silence of anxiety, of a man who speaks little because social contact is difficult. This is not strategic silence. It is its opposite. The tension in his posture, the avoidance in his eyes, the brief anxious answers produced when pressed. These are legible. People do not read this as depth. They read it as fragility. What I am describing requires something the constitutionally shy man often lacks: the comfort to speak, combined with the discipline to decline. Strategic silence is available only to the man who could speak freely but chooses not to. The runner who chooses not to sprint, not because his legs are weak, but because he has calculated that the race is long and the sprint is a gift to his competitors. This requires strength, not the absence of it. The man who speaks rarely is not the man who has nothing to say. He is the man who has learned that the value of what he says is determined by its rarity. He has understood that words are not free, that each word spent is a word that can never be recalled, that the person who heard it carries it into every future interaction with you. And this accumulated record shapes their understanding of what you are, what you want, and what you fear. He has understood that silence is not absence, and it is presence of a different kind, the presence of someone who has decided not to speak, and who, by deciding, has demonstrated the capacity for decision, the capacity to govern impulse, the capacity to remain composed where others leak themselves into the room through uncontrolled speech. He has understood that the person who fills every silence is most afraid of silence, and that fear, like all fears, is visible to those who are watching, and someone is always watching. He has understood, finally, that the purpose of speech is not expression. Expression is for the poet and the priest. For the man in the courts of power, the purpose of speech is effect. What do these words accomplish? What do they reveal, and what does their revelation cost? What would silence accomplish in every word weighed, every silence chosen? And men who speak rarely are paid attention to. Men who speak rarely and precisely are feared. Men who speak rarely, precisely, and only when the moment demands it. These men hold the room before they have said a word, because everyone in the room has learned from experience that when this man speaks, it is worth hearing, that what he offers has been selected from a larger store of what he knows, that beneath the single sentence is a structure of thought they are not being given access to, and that structure, unseen but sensed, is what makes him formidable. You may go through your life talking. Most men do. They talk in the morning and they talk at night. They fill every silence with noise because noise feels like safety. They explain themselves to anyone who will listen, to believing that explanation builds understanding and that understanding builds trust. They confess their ambitions and their anxieties. They share their strategies before they enact them. They reveal their positions before the negotiation has begun. And they wonder, after each defeat, after each betrayal, after each time they were outmaneuvered by a quieter man, why their intelligence and their effort were not enough. They do not wonder long, because they then begin to talk about it. The world does not owe you a sympathetic audience. The courts of power have never been sympathetic. They have been populated, in every era, by men who are watching and measuring and calculating, and who will use whatever you give them. The man who gives nothing unnecessarily is the man who keeps the advantage of his own mind. Speak less. Listen completely. Reveal nothing that does not serve a purpose. And when you do speak, make certain it is worth the cost. When you speak rarely, your words weigh more. Remember this, and say nothing until you must.